students, welcome to this series on business entrepreneurship. Today we are going to study the economic and the social impacts of business in the society. In this we are basically going to cover the economic impacts, how businesses help to grow and how society is impacted in terms of the changing norms and values. The businesses do impact the kind of the social structure and the economic prosperity of the people. In the words of Albert, art is the beautiful way of doing things, science is the effective way of doing things, but business is the economic way of doing things. So this explains you how important is business. It measures the cost, it measures the impact in terms so as to balance the utilization of resources for the benefit of the society. It is not the government, but it is the people who make the businesses prosper. It is the entrepreneurs who make the businesses grow. In the words of Phil, government is not the generator of the economic growth, but the working people are the generators of economic growth. According to Rod, a successful economic development strategy must focus on improving the skills of the area's workforce, reducing the cost of doing business, and making available the resources business needs to compete and thrive in today's global economy. This is important because we have to mobilize the resources in terms of the competitive positions which the countries are taking place in the global arena. The businesses are becoming tough. It is not only big businesses do matter, but it is small entrepreneurs who measure the economic prosperity of the countries, because the supply of raw materials and the accessories and the kind of subsidiaries are genuinely supplied by the suppliers as small industries. According to Larry, the dramatic modernization of the Asian economies ranks alongside the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution as one of the most important developments in the economic history. So the Industrial Revolution is the most important revolution which has changed the kind of the landscape of the human development. The industrial development, the business development and the economic prosperity are the parameters of judging the social stability of the country. The social stability is determined by the education level of the people. Education is the soul of the society. According to Albert Einstein, the school has always been the most important means of transferring the wealth of tradition from one generation to the next. This applies today in an even higher degree than in former times, for though the modern development of economic life is the family. So the family, the school, the education, they are the social parameters of the society, and businesses are the economic parameters of the society. In any case, the government has to balance both. As an economic promoter, it has to develop the industry, and as a kind of a promoter to the social welfare of the society, it has to look into the needs of the society also. But the society's needs can only be looked after and they can only be defined by good businesses, because it is the profits that generate wealth and income, and it is the income that generates resources to look after to the people's need. The government has an important role to play in the kind of the economic impacts in terms of enhancing the country's economic competitiveness, promoting the fiscal policy so as to boost the economic potential and the growth of the country. It has to guarantee the accessible health care to the systems in terms of generating hospitals and the healthcare system. It has to employ the policy in such a way the employment policies are created and the potentials are developed. It has to develop the system of education and learning and training. You have to improve the labor conditions of the country so as to generate a kind of a talented pool of people who can work to their maximum potential. You have to increase income and improve all the dimensions of life. The legislation in terms of consumer rights and labor union is also important. The consumer protection is important in terms because the kind of awareness and the kind of the welfare of the consumer is important in terms to give them the right products. The application of law in terms of risk on investing is important because it is the hard money of the people that is invested in the business. Spreading the dialogue between the countries at global level is important so as to come into a system of collaboration to do businesses. Development of infrastructure in terms of development of roads and light and electricity is important, and this can also be done by attracting the foreign investment. We have to develop a policy structure which looks after to the kind of the investment which comes from the foreign countries and to generate the investment from the private entrepreneurs. The modernization and development of the system is important in terms so as to make the country connected through the good transportation system. The modernization, the construction and the reconstruction is important of the airports, railways and other connecting routes. It is important to create a favorable condition of public transportation systems and public utility systems to facilitate business. You have to look into the micro enterprises who genuinely support to the local needs of the people. The creation of the sustainable business potential is important, and assessing the development of information system is also important. The government also has to look after the inflation, the labor productivity, the competitiveness, the competition, the taxation and other policy structures. So, it is such a major role that the government has to play on the development of the potential so that the businesses grow. The environment is important in terms of economic complexity and economic simplicity and the kind of the variables which happen into the environment. See, the kind of the scarcity of resources or the certain environment or the uncertainty of the business is basically dictated by the kind of the change of the variables happening into the businesses and the kind of the complexity of each variable. Let's see this graph in which we have plotted as the kind of the environmental uncertainty on y-axis, and on x-axis we have the kind of environmental characteristics. When the environment uncertainty is low, then the complexity and the change and the stability of the business is also low and there is low risk in business. But when the complexity is high in terms of both the changing factors, the complexity and the kind of the scarcity of the resources is there, the competition is more and the risk of investment is high. The external environment dictating the business comprises of many factors related to competition, to organization, to authority groups, to religion, to political, to technological, to socio-cultural and to economy, which is shown in this circle. Now, any kind of economic development or any kind of social development is also dictated by the kind of the technological impact on the economy. Technology in terms of knowledge, tools and techniques impacts the kind of the conversion of the input resources into the output resources. We have shown you in this diagram. Here you have the inputs in forms of raw materials and information which has to be converted into the output in form of products and services through the tools and techniques. The socio-cultural component of the environment is important, that is the demographic changes in terms of the behavior, attitudes and beliefs of the people, in which the customer becomes important. Customer is the focal point and the specific environment which governs the specific needs of the customers relate to customer, competitor, supplier, industry recognition and the advocacy group. But above all, the customer's awareness and the welfare is looked by the government. The government matches the customer's need. The government and the economy is more important in impacting the needs and assessing the needs of the customers. You have both the forces in terms of demand and supply. The government balances the forces of demand and supply through the economic balance and the social balance, which is shown in this model. The government is both the protector and the provider of facilities. It is genuinely a kind of a force in interpreting the social and the economic impacts. It is genuinely a force which assesses the threats and opportunities in the environment so as to govern the social values and the economic values of the society. So, the government basically maintains a balance we have shown you in this model. The government also builds the kind of the cognitive maps in order to specify the external variables impacting the businesses, depicts the kind of the behavioral changes happening into the environment and tries to organize the resources. The society is a collection of norms and values. It has both the standards in terms of the rituals, in terms of the behavior and in terms of the standards. Here we have shown you society. Society guided by rituals, society guided by norms and stories. Then you have the kind of behavior and standards which are the outcome of these aspects. It also has the impact of trends. Trends in terms of the communication trends, education trends, family, environment, information, home, age, income, all these are the kind of the trends which impact the profile of the product development and also impact the kind of the social standards. The future basically is dictated by the kind of the sophisticated trends in form of service development also. Services related to hospitals, services related to education, services related to information and communication, and the kind of the taxation or the finance services like insurance and banking also are becoming important. So these kinds of things are impacting the human development to higher level. The standards of living of people are changing. Genuinely people are demanding new types of products and services, which is putting a pressure both on the private entrepreneurs and the government sectors to design and to draw and to come out with the situations and options so as to give the product development in a sustainable way. The competition is high. It is being genuinely impacted by the high diesel prices and the petrol prices. Infrastructure is genuinely becoming pressurized because of the transportation pressure increasing on the roads. It is the price reduction as a part of strategy forcing the businesses into pressure. It is the competitive global market forcing the companies to give better products. It is the energy dependence and the scarcity of energy, and the kind of the cost of energy is putting a kind of stress on the business. The kind of the labor problem, the talent shortage and the labor shortage is genuinely dictating the industry ethics. The kind of the attrition, that is the job switching and the kind of job search, is also hunting the industry practices. The fluctuating metal cost and the resource cost is also impacting the businesses. We have to learn to be sustainable and we have to continually improve in order to compete with the outcomes. So basically the kind of the trends which are impacting the society are the major business market is impacted by the large markets, high growth, high talent pool, significant physical assets being gathered by the businesses, liberalized government structure and the developing of the institutional frameworks in order to govern most of the businesses, and we have the high infrastructure requirements also. But this is the kind of the emerging scenario in terms of the business terms. But in spite of all these development, we have certain issues which are genuinely putting an impact on the kind of scenario of the business and economic and social aspects. It's the kind of the financial markets emerging, the controlled kind of inflation rates impacting the businesses, the public assets being dictated by the business intervention. It is the varied degree of democratization of most of the countries and the democracies and the governments all over the world, and it is the diversified civic engagement of people into various activities. The economy is governed both by the rural and the urban sectors. Most of the issues which we discuss are related to the urban sectors because the development is high and the kind of the requirement in terms of needs for the people is high. The structures in the urban sector are developed because they genuinely relate to the higher needs of the life. But we have the rural citizens who are fighting for many things in life. This model shows how the rural citizen is requiring the supply of inputs, the issues and the licenses, the procurement procedures, the development of projects, the kind of access to the market, the education, training and the enhancement of employment opportunities, delivery of health systems, entertainment systems, knowledge and useful economic activities, and it is the supply of the consumer goods. So these are the basic issues which are dictating the rural economies, and the government is trying hard even to balance the kind of the rural connectivity to the urban sector. The basic force to connect the rural and the urban technologies together is through the internet or the kind of the computer and the ICT skills. Building a kind of a digital world will involve a kind of a transition of technology to connect both the sectors. The technology that makes the kind of access inexpensive, and the government sectors and non-governmental sectors making the processes easy, and then empowering people to use the technology and application that draws large clientele of people to come into the kind of collaboration. So the enablers of innovation in terms of ICT technology involve people, fund, process and innovation and technology together to come out with a solution that gives you a better life and a better solution. The role of government in the rural economies as a facilitator is important. Let's see here how the villages are impacted by the government. We have the economic potential of the government in this parameter where we have dictated this kind of a quadrant, and you have the size of the villages on this x-axis. When the economic potential and the size of the village is high, the role of the government becomes more important because the government has to give the facilities in terms of infrastructure and in terms of facilities to be connected. But then when the villages are small and the kind of the potential is less in terms of economic viability, then the process in terms of government to facilitate things become difficult because the cost of investment is high and the return is low. So in that case, you can promote the local entrepreneurs who can genuinely be rich people who could invest into facility building process and could take money and earn on it. The future of development is basically dictated by the integration of the knowledge and the society together to build up a kind of a structure which genuinely gives you growth in terms of collaboration with all the sectors of the development, that is the government, non-government and the private agencies. The economic and the social impacts of the future businesses would relate to this model we have shown you. The economic aspects relate to the savings, debt, credit, income and growth of the society, and the social aspects relate to the education, geographical shifts, household patterns of consumption, consumer patterns, values, population age. It is the kind of the talent hunt, the traditions, the norms, the culture and the community practices. It is the environment and pollution also, technology and innovation also, and the society and culture. All the mix of all these variables will decide the kind of the picture of the business shape and growth. The businesses will certainly be shaped by the impact of these variables. This environment is important because any change in this environment would change the business process, would change the business ethics, because as society has been educated and as society has been growing in terms of learning knowledges, you have seen the kind of the industrial revolution, you have seen the communication revolution, and then you have seen the kind of the revolution in terms of information and technological revolution. All these revolutions have been guided by the kind of the knowledge, that is education. Higher education is becoming important in terms of skill development, in terms of traditional development of people, in terms of developing competencies, and then training and retraining to develop skills. Both the corporate sector and the private sector and the government sector is involved in developing the higher education potential in terms so that the consumers become aware. We have the kind of the corporate social responsibility being made available to the society in terms to govern the ethics of the society, and then we have investment enterprises looking into the needs of the kind of the funding processes. The implications of all these aspects relate to the kind of the development of the society in terms which is advanced by the technology, economy and ecological kind of impacts which shapes the basic politics of the system. If the politics is good, the other variables do impact the kind of the sustainability in terms of governing the quality of life. In any case, it is the politics and it is the alive democracy of a country which sustains the systems to have a kind of a country and a society which is devoid of crimes, which has health services, which has affordable and a kind of a decent living, which has facilities related to life, and it has kind of jobs and employment present. The businesses have to be governed by many issues which do face and which are genuinely into problems. But these problems could be looked after if people do change in their attitudes and build up their kind of perceptions in terms of building honesty, integrity, respect for society, for environment. It is trust, it is responsibility, citizenship, the kind of awareness for health services, kind of care for the society, kind of care for conservation, and it is the kind for better living and thinking beyond the businesses in terms of social welfare aspects. Values are important in terms to give empowerment to people, empowerment to customers and to stakeholders. A transparent business system is important for the political, economic and social health of the country. The core importance of business is to build the kind of business ethics, customer ethics, organizational ethics and the country ethics. The concepts behind the businesses relate to the respect, integrity and excellence. Excellence in terms of making just an ethical decision, of openness and learning, integration and knowledge and growth. So you have to build up a system which genuinely is designed by the impact of the human values. If human values are there, the organizations would be able to attract better human talent, retain employees for the growth of the country, attract new customers so as to increase the business and provide a positive feedback and a kind of environment where corporate reputation is built up. The social interests have to be looked after by the government institutions. The outcomes will be in terms to make a better living and a better life. The political and the economic viability is important, genuinely to have a friendly relation in terms to transform the countries to the global arena in terms of being a better competitor. Better competitor to design the human capital and the social capital. It is the privatization of the companies to give you the better corporate governance, the speed and the feasibility to the businesses, better access to capital and skills, and make the government facilities to be better used by the people. A greater fairness is required to do businesses so that the country is looked after. The culture has to be impacted, the culture has to be valued, and it has to be respected. The basic culture and norms of the societies are governed by these axes. These are religion, political philosophy, economic philosophy, education, language, and the social structure. You need both discipline and practice to maintain a kind of a balance. The mix of all these aspects in terms of all the arenas put together built up the environment. The business and the stakeholder relationship is important. Here you can study this kind of relationship in this model. We have business being impacted by community, government, employee, consumer, and owner. Then this is impacted by the local, state, and the federal level of a part of the government. You have employees in terms of union employees, minorities, and labor welfare schemes. Then customers in terms of product, liability, threats, and consumer activities and awareness groups. Owner, you have the corporate riders, you have private citizens and institutional investors. We have the community which looks after to the environmental groups and to the general public. Now, this kind of awareness related to all these aspects will build an environment which is better designed by services which are genuinely looking after the human needs. Human needs in terms, it's not only the economic aspects, but the humanity has to be looked after. It is the kind of the perceptions that people's happiness and the people's feelings and emotions are important, and this has to be integrated into a system to make a society where trust is there, where friendship is there, and where the values are there, so that the people get attached and get connected. We have a kind of a model which is known as the corporate response model to design the better society. See, in this we have the factors in the social environment, and this is basically in kind of the affluence, education, and awareness. This is dictated by the kind of the rising expectations of people in terms of the entitlements to get into the kind of the wages, and that mentality basically gives you a kind of rights movement. Rights movement being a kind of a philosophy, that is victimization philosophy, has to be overcome. And then you have a business criticism in terms, that is you have to be more aware in terms of social criticism, and then develop a kind of a social change and a kind of a social contract system which is more valuable to the society in terms to increase the affluence and the education of the people in terms both the customers and the stakeholders. Awareness can be built through the television and the internet media. It could be through the revolutions and the expectations of the people, and the rights movement and the kind of the philosophy which measures the growth. Now, the social problems can be looked after by the corporate social responsibility concept. Whenever the businesses are genuinely facing this kind of unrest or this kind of pressure in terms, then they have to design a strategy where they can fund these kinds of issues and they can look after to the society. And if businesses looking after to the society, they are developed to their maximum potential. The kind of the social problem is genuinely in form of a gap which has to be funded by the businesses. The long-term impacts of these kind of economic and social aspects of businesses genuinely relate to the security of people in terms of the insurance and healthy policies coming to the people. It is the employment policies which give security to life. It is the kind of the obligations which the government pays to the employees in terms of taking their responsibilities. That is, we have to take a new kind of a sharing in terms of the societal welfare. The community service has taught me all kinds of skills and increased my confidence. You go out there and think on your feet, work with others, create something from nothing, and that is what life is all about. These words are by Andrew Carnegie. The social impacts of business are also designed by social entrepreneurship, a concept which is kind of a recent development in terms of the development for the society. The businesses are looking beyond economic welfare and also are building societies. We are the world of wall builders, practitioners, and dividers of space. We long for security of safe places. We construct these barriers in vain attempt to control the elements to keep the rain from dampening the fire, the wind from covering our lives, and the inevitable dust. Many of the walls we build are essential to our survival. Many, however, are not. By fortifying the unnecessary walls, we are in the business for profit and non profit. Hurdle in the systems we have closed. The consequences, thinking of profit and non profit, decays and the novelty vanishes. So these words basically tell you how important it is to look beyond the kind of the economic aspects. We are into a system where we have problems. The problems only can be solved by the social enterprises or by the people who look into the social problems. The businesses have to be the kind of these facilitators, or they are the protectors of the social problems. We are in the issues where the disaster is happening, we are in the issues where the kind of floods are there, we are in the issues where the famine is impacting the humanity. But how to tackle these problems? It is important that businesses do fund these kinds of aspects also. The social entrepreneurship in terms of building business empires looks beyond profits to change the norms of the society, to embrace the change in the social values, to seek a kind of a value which gives human satisfaction, and it becomes client focused to look into the specific needs of the people. The resources have to be shifted from the selfish means and to the societal aspects. We have to create something new so as to strive for transparency and to build a mission statement which is genuinely a kind of statement which has a desire to look after to the society. The organizations have to be ready to design a strategy and a governance system so that the human resources are built up. The operation, products and services which go into the kind of the selling and into the business operations have to be in relation to the society's need. We have to have a strategic management overview to build into the current state to come to an output state which is genuinely looking after the future also. Here we have shown you in this model that the current state is the kind of the assessment in terms of building and planning the processes, and here we have the objectives, and throughout the kind of the strategic implementation process you have to look into the future where the values, mission and vision of the business in terms of relationship with the stakeholders is important. That is your priority in terms of giving them the resources in terms of ability to sustain with the kind of the profitable relation with the business is important. The strategic priorities in terms of stakeholders relate to the financial priorities of giving them better dividends and better profits. Internal processes have to be streamlined to build up a low cost business. The human resources have to be upgraded and trained so as to do better business practices. The clients have to be answered in terms both product and quality. So this is the kind of the systematic approach that we need to have, a kind of philanthropic approach towards business. Balancing the mission and the financial statement both is important. Let's see this quadrant. Here we have the kind of x-axis and y-axis. We have the mission statement on x-axis and the kind of the business cases, that is the strong business case and weak business case on the y-axis. The highest priority, that is the valued business, is which has the advanced mission for the society and a strong business commitment towards that mission. That is, these businesses are valued by the society and these businesses do sustain in terms of client look after also. The consumers would buy products from the companies who are looking to the ecological needs, who are looking to the social needs and who are sustaining the kind of society in terms of resource building. The limited access, that is the philanthropy, starts from you are not pursuing a thing when the weak business is there and you have a limited business in terms of only building profits, but then you move to a higher priority stage and then you come to philanthropy and then last you come to a kind of a commitment state towards building the mission. So this state has to be valued this state is there, you have to create a kind of a work environment which genuinely balances both the economic aspects and the social aspects. You have to be a kind of a facilitator, you have to be a kind of a protector, and you have to be kind of a assimilator in terms to balance the needs of the society, where the problems are there, where the issues are there. See, if a good environment is there in the society, genuinely it will be favorable for the businesses. But if the society is deteriorating, if the norms are changing, and if the values are changing, genuinely the businesses will also be under pressure, because it is from the society and it is from the values and the traditions of the people that businesses do get the kind of the profits and the money. So it is also important for the businesses to design a kind of a system which genuinely is sustainable in terms of the values and the aspects which people have a favorable kind of a inclination which is able to build a kind of a trustful system, a system which genuinely has a kind of a favorable environment for the growth and investment, and genuinely a system which is devoid of corruption, and a system which has faith in terms of investment building. If this is the system, the risk will be low. The risk of earning profits or losses genuinely is balanced by the kind of good feelings of the people, and a good business institution would be built up by the good investment policies of the government and by the people. Thank you, students.